All right, so welcome back to another episode of Palm Harbor Local. On today's episode, we are sitting down with Brandon Dill from Fuse Lenses. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So why don't we start with just like what you guys do at Fuse Lenses, and then I want to dive into, like we've talked about before, kind of your story and like how you got started with the company.
Okay. We make high-end sunglass lenses that we get directly to the end user, so the customer. The most popular way that that's done is through replacement lenses. A customer will buy lenses for their Oakley or Ray-Ban frame. We custom cut lenses to fit those frames, send them directly to the customer, and then the customer will pop them in themselves. We also make prescription glasses. We make regular sunglasses complete. So any way that we can get our lenses to our customers.
Yep. And so what's great about that is, and you replaced some lenses of mine. So I had some Maui Jims and that were all scratched up, beat up and everything. And instead of having to go out and buy a new pair of sunglasses and spend, $200,
Yep.
like I can just come in and grab some new lenses and they look the exact same.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Maui Jims are upwards of like $350 now, $400. So yeah, our replacement lenses start at about $25. The most expensive that we have are $75, and they're like top of the line. I don't want to try and get sued by Maui Jim, but they're some of the best lenses in the market. We'll say that.
Yeah, there you go. So how did so take us back to the beginning of Fuse Lenses. The company's been around for 10 years now?
Yeah, about 10 years.
And so how did you get started? How did this all start?
I was running a wholesale lab that made prescription glasses for a bunch of different doctors' offices, like ophthalmology practices. We were doing only prescription. I ran that lab. My boss was an accountant. He didn't have an optics background or anything. I had this neighbor that was like needing a new pair of sunglasses. He banged up his old Spy Optics. It's a brand of sunglasses. He banged them up pretty bad and was asked me if I can get him a pair of Spy Optics sunglasses. I didn't happen to have an account with Spy, so I wasn't able to get those. And he was like, man, I wish there's something I can do. It's just scratched up lenses. I was like, well, I can make lenses. That's what we do. The way we make prescription lenses is much more expensive than making non-prescription. So I was like, let me see if I can source something that's pre-made with no prescription, and all I have to do is cut them down for you. Sure enough, I found something that's called finished stock, is what that term is in the optical industry. Cut him a pair of polarized gray lenses for his Spy Optics frames, and he was a firefighter. Took him back to his fire station. Was like pumped that he fixed his glasses. Told all his buddies at the fire station. And like the next day, I had like 4 more orders. They're like, we have drawers full of sunglasses with scratched lenses we just can't wear anymore, but like can't bring ourselves to throw these away because they cost so much.
Yeah.
So next day, I had a bunch of orders. Thought this might be like a good eBay business, like selling aftermarket parts type of thing, and just kind of started there.
Yeah. And then so you started. Did you ever have a background in this business, or did you ever think you would get into this business? How did you get into that?
In optics in general, my dad was the first lab manager at the first ever VisionWorks. I kind of grew up in that field. It's not a super glamorous field, but it's really small. Like everyone kind of knows everyone. So when I was 16, he got me a job. He wasn't working at VisionWorks anymore, but pulled some strings, got me a job at VisionWorks working in their lab making prescription glasses. Okay. So literally, VisionWorks was my first job. I mean, I washed dishes at a pizza place when I was 15, and then 16, I started working in making prescription glasses. Okay. And then I didn't consider myself a business person at all, and I never really thought I'd be going into business for myself. But I worked at VisionWorks for 10 years, worked myself up the ranks, became like a territory director for them. Okay. And then a headhunter called me. I was living in Orlando at the time. Headhunter called me and was like, hey, we're opening this lab in Clearwater. We want you to come run it. So I went to go work for that lab. As I mentioned before, my boss there was the owner, and he was an accountant. So no optical background, but I got a good lesson in business from him. He trusted me to run his lab and his operations, and I got a lot of business knowledge from him. So he's kind of a mentor in that respect. And
so you grew up in the area. So you moved away to Orlando for a little while and then came back.
Yep. I moved to Orlando for a few years. My mom lives in Orlando. I was born in Orlando. Okay. Moved to Pinellas County when I was 18 months old with my dad. And we, I was raised in this area, moved away in my 20s to Orlando for 3 years. I could not wait to get back here, man. I love the beaches too much,
Yeah. It's still right. Orlando's Florida, but it's totally different vibe and experience in Orlando. For sure.
I feel bad for people whose only experience of Florida is Orlando. It's like so much better over here,
right?
You know,
on any of the coast in Florida, right?
Yeah,
totally different.
Exactly.
So tell me about like growing the business and how like what was the thought process behind like, okay, I got some orders in, maybe this is a business here. Like, how did you transition to like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this and commit to this full time?
Yeah, I was just trying to hustle. I just wanted to make some money on the side. I had a baby and just wanted to make some extra money. I never thought that this would be a business, like an actual business. You know, we were selling a couple pairs of lenses a week. Okay. And so there was never like a real business plan or anything. I just, started cutting lenses and actually using my boss's facilities to cut the lenses and then packing them up and shaping them out at night. And it just kind of gradually grew and grew and grew. We were kind of forced into growth.
Yeah. Where did you start selling them? Like if it was it just word of mouth and locally, or? It
was eBay first, and there was just nobody else doing it. You know, we're like creating a niche, so crazy. It was niche enough that, people would type in maybe like how to replace scratch sunglasses, and the only way to fix scratch sunglasses is to replace the lenses. Like you can try and rub toothpaste on them, but that doesn't work. Yeah. So, I think it was just kind of like this gradual thing. I mean, when we first started, we only sold photochromic lenses. They were, they turned from clear to gray. Oh yeah. Because I had an account with my old job that gave us free photochromic non-prescription lenses. Okay. So I'm like, well, these are free. I'm just going to sell these on eBay and see what happens. And so like when we first started, we only sold those, and it was like, all right, we got enough sales now to buy our first $100 worth of gray polarized lenses, and so we sold gray polarized lenses, and then we just kind of everything we put back into that business. I didn't quit my job for a long time. I ran that business on the side for a long time before I quit. Yeah.
How big was like Fuse Lenses before you like jumped into it full time?
We were doing $1 million in revenue. I had a year. I had 6-7 employees.
And like still working your full-time job. Yep. And then obviously this is another full-time job.
Yep. We opened up shop. So the lab I was running is right around the corner from my shop now because I wanted to be close. So like if a machine broke down, I could just like go fix it on my lunch break and then come back. And, it just got to a point where it was obvious that like the more time I didn't spend on Fuse, the more opportunity we were losing. Yeah. And, so I went to my boss one day and was like, hey, that little side business I started? Because he knew about it. He's like, yeah. I'm like, we're doing $1 million a year in sales. And like, I need to put some more effort into this and try and grow it, but I gave him a year's notice. I gave him 6 months full time and then started weaning off for the last 6 months, like to, eventually going to a day a week. And then it was just like, all right, I'm good to go. So I tried very hard not to burn that bridge. And I took that last year and really doubled down on learning his financial strategies to run his company because he's an accountant. He's been in business for a long time. So I learned as much as I could from him before jumping ship. Yeah.
That's super smart. And I think like that, like starting a side hustle is probably like a great way to start a business, right? Without like needing, to make it. I think we talked about this before when we first met, right? The idea of like you have your bills and everything taken care of, so you can take risk or invest everything back into this other company, this other business that you're starting, and you probably grew a lot faster. Maybe not because you weren't spending a lot of time in there, but you might have had a lot more struggles and stuff if you jumped into it full time and needed to make money from day one.
Yeah, I tell a lot of people. I mean, I only know one way to do it. I know there's a lot of people that go out and get like venture capital and start these big things right out the bat. They have like these great ideas they're selling out on. I only know the kind of start from the ground up with nothing. Literally, like when somebody says you can start a business with $0, I literally started this business with $0.
Yeah, right.
When I just tell people that, like, don't quit your day job if you don't have to, because if I was feeding my family off the income this was producing, which wasn't much in the beginning, maybe I would have never taken the risk to put the gray polarized lenses in there. And if we didn't do gray polarized, I mean, photochromic lenses now are like one of our worst performing lenses. There's still a need for it, but it's not big.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have put in a batch of inventory of the next lens. Like, that $100 of gray polarized lenses would have been taking food out of my family's mouth. And, let's face it, business is all about risk. If you're not willing to take risks, then it's going to be hard to grow.
Yeah. Slow growth, painful growth, right? Yep. So I want to ask you a couple questions. One of them that you mentioned before is on like staying focused, right? I feel like that's a hard thing. It's something I struggle with too. And I think it's a hard thing now with so many distractions that we have around us, with our phones like constantly on us. So, when did you realize that was like a struggle? And then like, what are some things that you have done to help you like lock in and stay focused when it's important for you to stay focused?
I would say I probably realized far too late that I have a problem with focus. I have a friend that ran this personality survey program called Culture Index. Check it out if you haven't. And it's just, you just click these boxes that describe who you think you are or whatever. And, it spits you out a personality profile. And he was describing this personality profile to me. And I have this profile called a trailblazer, which is a very visionary. Like, I'm just always thinking about the future. I never, ever, ever think about the past. I'm like, I'm just not that type of person.
Right.
Anyways, he's describing this personality profile, and he's like, yeah, you're not very attention to detail. You're not like detail oriented. You kind of like, you take risks. He's like, you probably lose focus all the time. Like the next shiny object that rolls by, you're going to like, want to grab after that. And I'm like, man, that is so me. And it's like hurting my team, because we'll be midway through a project and, be like, oh, you know what? Let's drop that and let's go over here and do this. Like I'm just constantly changing gears,
Yeah. And
I still do. But what we started doing as a result of that was, I started reading up on it, about focus. And I read this book called Radical Focus.
Okay.
I can't think of the author off the top of my head, but it's like a little short, like Aesop fable type of thing where this business guy creates this objectives and key results system for his team, where like every quarter we come up with a quarterly objective. Our whole leadership team comes up with this quarterly objective, and then we measure that objective with three to five measurements somehow, like which we call key results. So it's OKRs is what we call this.
Okay.
And then we have all of our tasks, and if those tasks aren't aligned with that objective, we don't worry about it. Like we put that down into like another like task to come, and then maybe in the next quarter our objective will change. So like usually in the slow season for us, our objectives will be a lot more about like building the foundations of our processes. So when we get busy again, we'll be more secure and ready to grow again. Where we're not going to worry about bringing in new product and stuff in the slow season. We worry about that more in the busy season. So like. That kind of has helped us get focused, and it helped me get an idea quarterly to a team and not have to I really had to bite my tongue for the rest of the quarter to not try and change things.
Stick with it for that full quarter until it's done, right?
Yeah.
I like that. And that's like a book. So I read Traction, and they have a like similar concept where they have quarterly rocks in there, and then like an issues list. And it's like, the issues list is everything that needs to be solved in order to meet your quarterly rocks or quarterly objectives that you're trying to accomplish.
I like that. I'll read that book. So like now this is my problem. I'll read that book and then I'll go and change our OKRs to be more like Traction or something like that. But if my team's listening, sorry guys, this is coming.
And I think that's the hard part of it about being a business owner is, you see this, you hear about this new idea, and then maybe it's almost better to like take a step back and like, okay, let's think about this before because I'm the same way. Like I'll read something and be like, that's really cool. Like that would be great for my business. But maybe you take a step back, or you put it on that that list of like, we'll revisit that next quarter, right? And
Yeah.
then like that's when you like, review it and see if it's a good fit for your overall goal for that year.
It's kind of a balance though too, because if you're focused on staying the same, you're gonna lose in the long run. Like change is good in business. I mean, like COVID hit, and we're just so used to changing up everything like in our business that COVID hit, and it was just like another change. Like we grew. Granted, we're in online sales, so a lot of online sales companies grew, but it wasn't like a panic moment for us. It was like, okay, well, this is another change we're going through.
Just normal occurrence.
Yeah, we never sit still, but when you're setting those goals quarterly, and also reading is knowledge to me. Like I read and listen to podcasts constantly. If you're not implementing any of it, then what's the point? Knowledge is wasted if it's not being implemented on some level. So, but yeah, you don't want to change. You don't want to iterate too soon. It's kind of it's a balance. And that's a struggle.
Yeah, and it always will be, right?
Yep.
So what about, so you just mentioned like reading and like personal development, personal growth, that sort of thing. Has that like always been important to you and something that you've always been kind of drawn towards?
I am not a reader. Like I'm 42 now, so I've been reading since I was 30. And I never read a book that I wasn't forced to read. Okay. Like even as a kid, like, I was not a reader.
Yeah.
And my old boss made me read this book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And I thought that was a really interesting book, but it took me forever. It probably took me 6 months to read that book, like just, a couple of lines at a time. And the more I read, the more I started getting, value out of it. And the easier it became. I still can't read fast. I still only read a couple of paragraphs that are a couple of pages at a time. I don't understand how somebody can sit for like 2-3 hours and read, but
yeah.
The big thing, two big things I learned from my last 12 years of reading is that I don't, if a book is losing me, like I just can't get into it. If I'm 100 pages into a book and I just can't get into it, I put it down. I just change. I'm not going to hate reading just because I can't get into this book.
Do you come back to it?
Sometimes.
Okay. Yeah.
But not usually.
Yeah.
And a lot of books you read, especially on like business and marketing and self-improvement and all that, they're just beating the same point home over and over again.
Right?
Yeah.
Just a different point of view.
Yeah. The other thing I don't do, which I think a lot of people struggle with, is like if I'm reading a sentence and I'm like kind of going off in my own head, not paying attention to what I'm reading, I don't go back and read the sentence anymore. I used to, but oh man, I have to reread that. I have to go back. Oh, I didn't quite understand it. I'm going to have to go back and read it again. I don't waste my time with that. I feel like I'm just soaking it in anyways. You kind of pick up, or I at least kind of pick up the message that's important for me at that time with whatever book I'm reading. So like if I go back and read the same book 2 years from now, it'll be a different message I get from it. It'll just be pertinent to that part of my life.
Yeah. I think that's a good point too, right? Because you have different experiences. You're at a different point in your life, right? So I always have like a handful of books that I like to go back to and just reread for that reason, because there's, it's going to hit different each time you read it.
What's your top one?
Man, so Traction right now is a good one that I really like and have implemented some things. I always go back to The Go-Giver. So that's a good one.
I've never heard of that
just
one.
Kind of like, they have 5 laws, and it's just it's an easy read and just a good like foundational book to read.
Cool. I love the easy read ones, man.
Yeah.
I'll order a book on Amazon and it'll come in and be like, man, this is 400 pages. Like I'm a 200 page guy,
Yeah.
But reading is probably one of the most important things for me now. I bring all my books into, you probably saw the library at my office where like I have my team, like if you want to get inside my head, just read these books I've been reading. And
so are you Audible, or do you like reading the physical copy of the book?
I'm usually physical copy.
Yeah.
Like I like Audibles for like, I actually have a couple of books that are just in my phone for like when I'm running or something in the morning.
Yeah.
Like books that aren't necessarily helpful, like Animal Farm is one of my go-tos. I love that book. Okay. And then that Pablo Coelho book,
Public, is that,
Man.
yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about.
The Alchemist.
Yes.
The Alchemist.
Yeah. That's a good one.
That audiobook is like, the guy's voice who's like reading it is just so soothing. So like it'll be like dark. I'm running in the morning and I'm just listening to that book. I love it, man. But usually I'm listening to podcasts or something, and I like to read the books, and I like to read the hard books so I can bring them into the office and other people can like share them.
Yeah, cool. So what's one of your top books right now? Or just top books of all time?
Yeah, I'd say the book that changed my life was probably Think and Grow, or not Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh yeah,
like that got me, and that's the case for a lot of people. I found out.
That was me. Yeah, that was the first book I read that got me. And so same thing with you. Like I didn't read growing up or whatever as much, and then for whatever reason I was like I need to change something, and I wanted a book on real estate or personal development, something like that. And so I settled on Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that was a book. I'm like, oh shit.
You realize it's a mindset in that book. Like it's not an intelligence thing. It's not how you're brought up. It's a mindset. Like, success is a mindset. So, I really love that one. Good to Great is an awesome business book.
Oh, okay. I've heard that mentioned a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good like kind of customer experience book, and like there's all kinds of like, if you're a CEO, like The Hard Thing About Hard Things is really good. Mm-hmm. Anything I read about like Jeff Bezos, like kind of makes me depressed, because I'm like, man, that guy had it figured out. He literally knew what he was doing in '98. He knew what he was doing. It's like he's so ahead of the curve.
To have that vision for all of that is crazy. Right?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. But those are a couple of my favorites.
Yeah. And so E-Myth, that was like the first one you read?
Yeah, E-Myth is really good. It's kind of about processes, and he talks a lot about like McDonald's, simplifying processes. Like McDonald's is literally run by teenagers. It's like one of the biggest companies in the world, and it's run by teenagers. Yeah. Because the processes are simple and very defined and laid out, and your cheeseburger in Japan tastes the same as it does in the States. And I've tested that out. It's the same.
Very similar, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So kind of going beyond and like the personal growth aspect, and that's like growing a team. How has that been for you who's, never thought of themselves as a business owner growing up, but now you manage, 30 plus people for your company. How has that been?
Yeah, that's been the biggest struggle, I think, for me, because also in that personality profile, besides the lack of focus, is like, what makes somebody a great entrepreneur is this like drive to do everything themselves, so like you're wearing all these hats in the beginning, and like, you have this vision, you want it done a certain way. It's just easier to do it yourself. It's really hard to delegate because everything is important. And it really is in the beginning. So like the person who founds the company doesn't usually go on to be CEO for, the entirety of the company. It's very rare to see that happen. And a lot of that is the transition from like this entrepreneur spirit to like this team leadership spirit, where like, your growth is going to depend on other people. There was no doubt that the pivotal moment for us as a company is when we hired our first employee. And that's when we became a business. I consider that to be when we became a business and not just a side hustle in my garage, although that first employee was cutting lenses in my garage. Yeah. That was when it was like, okay, there's like mouths to feed. This is important now. Like there's a life on the line here. And as we grew, I'd probably say to about maybe 8 employees. I could see every time we added an employee, we would grow. It was like, we would just grow. It was like changing the size of a fish tank. Grow, okay. Yeah, we would grow bigger because we added more people. That stopped at a certain point, by the way. Don't like just unnecessarily hire people. Yeah. But we would grow to a certain size, and at about 8 people, I was still in charge of everything. I mean, I was doing everything still. I was like kind of just saying like, it was easy to communicate. You can effectively communicate with 8 people. When we got over that though, it became very obvious that like people weren't talking to each other. There was like starting to be like rifts in between, like there wasn't departments, but rifts between people and jobs that needed to get done. And communication became like this very obvious thing that needed to happen, and I just was so overwhelmed, there just seemed like there was so far to go. You
right,
know,
right.
So against the grain of my nature to be bringing people together to communicate. You know, so again, I turned to books and podcasts and read and studied and messed up a whole bunch along the way, and got a good team of people to buy in. You know, eventually, I mean, right now we're at 32 people. I've got 8 people in my leadership group. They are all bought in. They're all self-developers. They feel like they're part of something bigger. They understand the vision and the mission, and they're communicating that to their team. So like where we're at in their process is developing them to be able to pass this on the same way I did to their team. So cool. At worst case scenario, we just have a group of people that are too overqualified for the positions they're in, and we can't support them, so they have to move on to somewhere else, you know?
Yeah.
But that's the struggle, you know. The development of people is always the hardest part, but it is the most fulfilling part.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that lady running my marketing department came from Panera Bread. She was making sandwiches, and now she's a marketing director. Yeah. She could leave me now and go make twice what she's making now.
Yeah.
Hopefully she doesn't want to, but you know, she could.
Yeah. So, so reading and just, you know, I want to touch on like what you just mentioned too about failing. Like you just tried a bunch of things. You pulled tips and stuff from books and other people around you, and then just tried to implement them, failed, learned what worked, you know, and what didn't, and moved on. I think that's an important piece of like being okay with failing and trying, you know, new things.
Yeah, I think most of being a leader is just kind of like being able to communicate. I mean, everything comes down to communication always, and how you do that, hopefully productively and like positively. Even if you're counseling someone through a termination, you know, like there's a right way to do it, you know. Sure. And then taking the blame, you know, like I don't know, I've got amnesia. Like I said, I never think about the past, so I'm perfectly suited for that position, you know. Like, I mean, go ahead and blame me. I'm willing to make the big calls because I just don't feel pain from the embarrassment of a failure. It's to me, it's part of the learning process. You know?
Yeah. Is that a trait like you always had that you felt like you had growing up, or something you kind of learned just from growing the business?
I think I always had it.
Yeah.
I'm very competitive.
Yeah.
So like in the moment, a failure will hurt me.
Stings a little. Yeah.
Yeah, but I almost look for it now. I look for the areas we fail, so we know where we can improve.
Yeah,
you know?
Where you can grow from that.
Yeah,
I like it. So one thing I want to kind of wrap up with, and this will be fun too because you grew up in the area, but I always like to ask everyone like what's their favorites, like local spots, whether it's a business, whether it's a park, you know, whatever. Like if you had a day to yourself, like what are you doing? Where are you going?
Man, I do so much. I'm like a hobbyist. I'm not good at anything. I just do a lot of stuff. But like, we take the boat out a bunch. Okay. We love taking the boat out just to the islands or stuff. I'm a spear fisherman, so like I've got a buddy I go spear fishing with all the time. Like we go 50 miles offshore. I don't know his dives, like his spots. He would kill me if I gave him away, anyways. But and then my wife and I got e-bikes recently, and I guess probably about a year ago. But we ride those things everywhere, man. We go all the way to Tarpon Springs. We go all the way to Clearwater Beach.
Yeah.
I live right by downtown Dunedin, so we spend a lot of time there.
Okay.
And then Palm Harbor. Yeah. I know Ben from Dubai got mentioned on this by Mitch.
He's going to be on the podcast soon. We got to get him on.
Yeah, if you're watching this, you can tell that Mitch and I are friends too. You know, so Mitch is a tattoo artist.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll actually be seeing Ben tomorrow, so I'll mention that.
Yeah.
And then so we go to Dubai and just got the best beer around. I'm not a craft beer guy, but I like their beer.
Yeah. So, and the Pinellas Trail is so cool too, because we've spent so much time just like biking up and down, like you said, Dunedin to Tarpon. Yeah. There's just so much you can do like right off the trail. It's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So awesome, Brandon. Well, I appreciate your time today and appreciate you joining us, man.
Thanks, man. It was fun.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.